the accomplished producer of Patty Duke Show, One Life to Live, The Addams Chronicle, the award-winning Addams Chronicle, The Doctors, and of course, Dark Shadows. Currently, he teaches television production at New York University. The Dark Shadows Festival is very pleased and very proud to welcome him for the first time, Robert Costello.
I'll come over here. Where can I not? Is that all right?
That'll work. Just go too far down.
Okay. Well, here we are. This is my first experience with the Dark Shadows group, only because I've been, over these many, many years, we just never meshed in terms of my availability and your availability. So tonight we're available together, and I'm very pleased to be invited to be here, and delighted with the... It's really marvelous. I mean, it brings back these live days of Dark Shadows. We did a very modest amount of editing in those days. I didn't think you'd notice, but it was very primitive. It was like one step up from razor cuts. And any of you that are quarter-inch audio fans probably know that you can cut and patch, and that was just about maybe a hair beyond that kind of editing, but we didn't have the sophistication of going back and doing a fast pickup and laying it in. And money played a tremendous part in our budget. And I don't tell you, I think we weren't as aware. We knew that mistakes were made, but I don't think we were quite as aware of the mistakes as isolating them and then stringing them together like a bunch of beads and laying them on there. God knows we did have a lot of chuckles about the fact that some of our actors could go up in the middle of words and others paraphrase them like they had not even met the rest of the cast. It had its excitement, and it was really, I think, probably the most interesting show. Certainly not intellectually the most stimulating, but on the one hand, on the other hand, it was a tremendously stimulating show in that we never kidded it. We laughed a lot about it, but I think that was probably what made it good. We laughed because we enjoyed it, and all these things were our friends, and we created them for enjoyment. We didn't create them to be ridiculed, or we didn't create them to make fun of by us or by anybody else. And I think the other plus in the show, looking at the time we realized this, it was a show for people, for everybody. You could make it whatever you wanted to make it. If it was camp, it was camp. That was your privilege. If you liked the kind of show that had a little spook and a little tingle, and you were willing to suspend disbelief a whole lot, then you had it. If you wanted to laugh, you had it. So I think the fun of the show and the popularity of the show was that it had a very, very general and tremendous audience. And we had some marvelous people writing the show, and some wonderfully stimulated people, stimulated by their own imagination, and as I said before, by their own sense of fun and fair play, because we did not want to cheat in any way by making it ridiculous, or making our audience ridiculous by watching it, or making our performers ridiculous by performing it. Jordan Russell was there first as a writer, wonderfully funny man. He died a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, he had gone on. He continued to write soaps, and he's tremendously creative. Sam Hall still writes soaps in New York with ABC. And he's a wonderfully inventive fellow. Dan Curtis, who created it, had to obviously have some sort of quirk to even think of this, but I must say that the idea of the spooks really came from all of us. My contribution was I'm a very good line producer. Basically, that's what I do. And a line producer is the guy he has originality, but he also has other things to contribute. And he can be part scene designer, part director. I'm a member of the Directors Guild of America. I have been a scene designer. You're a pretty good technician. You know what you can do with the equipment that you have and some of the effects, the ghosts appearing and disappearing. So that the contribution, if they said, hey, Bob, how can we get we want Josette's portrait to come alive, which was our first venture into the world of ectoplasmic manifestations. Can we do that? So yes, I said we can. We can do that. We can do that by keying her in, putting her all in black, creating a second set in another area of the studio, and then matching the two cameras. Her set would be entirely black, and there would be a staircase coming down where she drifted down and steered out of the portrait, so you would walk out of the portrait down and save the kids. She would be walking down a jet black velour-covered flight of stairs. We would key that into the room in which her portrait was. She would just materialize out of which you've matched her, placed her into the portrait as the dimensional figure. The black ate up the light, you see, so she was just inserted there. You dissolve her through, and she would then seem to materialize and slowly turn, and then just step out, and you tried to have the sensation of her gliding gracefully down into the room. You then would cut away to the amazement of whoever had seen this sort of thing, and she runs like mad, gets over into the set, and when you come back, she's in the same room with her own portrait again. Now that was doing it live, because as I said earlier, that we had the editing problems. We didn't have the time, we didn't have the equipment, the electronic equipment wasn't even developed at that stage of the game. ABC was also the impoverished network at that time. It had no money, and where the NBC, the class acts were NBC and CBS. So Dark Shadows contributed to the class effect of ABC. It had a great deal to do at that time with putting it on the map in daytime, of making it a special, different network. It was bringing new things into the world in terms of daytime programming. But they still didn't have a lot of money to invest in the show, and that plus the other things I mentioned. So we were still doing it more live than we were doing it edited version as we do today. Today we shoot them like film. If you're doing a soap opera today, and see, I did Another World, Orion's Hope, I did for 5 years, produced for 5 years. But today we shoot those shows like in the manner that you shoot them in film. And that is, if you will take all the sets in the bar room, all the scenes rather in the bar room, and you'll shoot the scenes in the bar room. Then you'll go to the living room. You'll shoot all the scenes in the living room. And then you go to the bedroom or whatever the other subsequent sets, or if you have done any location shooting on tape, you'll then log that in as time. You have timed all these segments, all these pieces of scenes. You then take them to the editing room that night or the following day, and you're one of either your associate producer and your AD, or a producer and an AD, assistant director, go in and they string it together in the proper order, timing it as they go along, keeping tabs on the time, snipping here, putting a phone call in there. Many of the effects and the music are laid in there on time. It's really it's a motion picture thing now. It's compressed and it is a motion picture. Well, in design, really it is. We still do a multi-camera rather than single-camera shooting, but you can do a pickup, and you can insert the pickup in the particular shot. If you need a reverse shot and you can't get it without moving a lot of scenery, you will today, when the scene is over, come around behind somebody. If they've been reading a note or writing a check, you'll just get the camera in behind, which would have been caught in the other shot since you were multiple camera shooting. Bring the camera around, the person is writing the check, and you see what you read the check, bang, that's it, you go away. So when they edit the next day, they just pop this in. It doesn't even a matter of time. I'm going to a little bit of detail just so when I say we do it live, then all our effects were done on the spot. We didn't edit effects. We may go back and try and do them again if we could. But as you saw, we didn't do a lot of going back and doing it again. No matter how embarrassing it seems to be today, I'm appalled, as a matter of fact. I guess we brought a lot of suspension of disbelief too, along with the audience. That's why a lot of these things you do see, all the effects of pushing into names I am terrible on. Into the blue eyes of Laura Parker, and then chroma keying. And once we went to color, we started in black and white and then went to color. Once we got into color, we could chroma key into her blue eyes. So we'd go right into her blue eyes and create a scene, start to come out and dissolve through from her eyes, or create flame in her eyes. And we would do that all in the first crack. Might go back and do the whole scene again, but really not very often. We had one shot of it. We really dealt with it like we had one shot at it. Unless it was a total disaster, we never went back. I guess we're so spoiled today. Looking back, I can't believe we didn't go back. But looking at this, I realize we didn't go back. But all our effects then were done. The effects of opening Count Patoffi's cabinet, and we had a piece of blue blotting paper inside with a little thin fluorescent tube, and that was blue. And when he opened it up, we would start to key in the vistas beyond, and the camera would move and transport you into another time with Patoffi's Patoffi's hand walking across. It was all manipulated live, no gimmicks. A hand would do it. Barnabas's aging, strictly makeup in one shot. It would all be taken care of by the one shot. I think what else? Incidentally, our the makeup used to take hours sometimes on Barnabas, particularly when he was an old man. It was all latex and layers upon layers of the build-up. Barnabas, when the show started, you may know this, it started as a Gothic tale. My name is Victoria Winters, and it was the crazy uncle someplace up on the coast of Maine, and the nervous Elizabeth Collins, and the little boy that she'd come to be the governess for. I mean, right out of the textbook of writing Gothic tales. The only thing Louis Edmonds didn't do was play the violin. He was right on the nose in terms of Gothic tales. Whoever nose we were on, it wasn't the audience's nose at that time, because we weren't doing terribly well in ratings. We were kind of a fun show to watch, but it just didn't catch on. Although Gothic novels for home consumption were in, the world wasn't quite ready for the little girl on the rock-bound coast of Maine. Little would they know what they were. We realized what they were ready for. Vampire. So it started really with Josette Collins, was what we wanted. We had it on the property. We shot up in near Tarrytown. And on the property, we discovered an older house. It wasn't an older house, but it was a house that was built to look older. It was a colonial, sort of a classical kind of colonnade house. And you've seen the distorted shots and looking up. It really wasn't a very old house. It was built in the 20s, I think, where Lyndhurst, which was the real old, was the oldest house on the property. We didn't even use Lyndhurst. We found another house up in Newport. I was trying to think, there was a girls' school up there, and so we were able to use that, shooting around fire escapes and things that they had since subsequently added to the building, but at night you couldn't tell, and we got the fogs and everything. Sending it in, you didn't even have to look for the fog. It would roll in off the bay every sunset, so there it was. And Collinsport was the only town in the world, I don't think the sun ever shone, and it was thunder and lightning all the time. There was never any midnight. It was either dawn or sunset. Up and down and out. Marvelous town. So we started with Josette, and we put the two children in jeopardy. Somehow they got trapped in the old house by a crazy old man who was the caretaker of the property, and he locked them. I guess Josette wasn't the first. We had the little girl that came and bounced balls. What was her name? There you are. And so that was our first little bit of mystery. And then Josette came alive and saved the children by coming down and beating the hell out of Count Petofi, later Count Petofi, and that was the end of him. He died, David, and he did die, yes. But that was the end. Now, the audience liked that, and we were thrilled because we kind of liked it too. It was different, but we didn't believe it would pass off in the daytime. So you go, oh, that's probably only to be read at night or viewed at night. However, they were viewing it at mid-afternoon, and so the next step, we had a few more mysterious little things, and we said, well, what about how about a vampire? Oh, that was a good one on us, you know. We laughed and thought that would be great sport. But the more we thought about it, the more it did seem to be, considering the conditions of our house and the situation and the graveyards that we seemed to fall through every now and then, and the fact that we did create portraits that came to life, and we had set up a previous history of someplace else in Jamaica or down in the Indies someplace. We did have ingredients for a story that could take it a step. We didn't really have to manufacture it a great deal. It wasn't running through the dictionary and we got to the D's and about to give up, we saw vampire, so that's it, we'll do vampire. But we came around, and it wasn't so much doing the idea of a vampire, well, how can I say this, it was the idea of doing a vampire, but the idea that he was on the property and he became a mystery. He had to be developed out of the story. So we led up to the story, and greed, like that Willie Loomis's greed to finally unleash the vampire, and as the lid raised, creak, the hand came up and snapped, and that was the beginning of Barnabas. The question in our mind was, Jesus, a guy running around biting guys on the throat, biting a guy? Are you kidding? You know, how much can you do this? So if you notice, the first bite he ever had was on the wrist. Willie got bitten on the wrist and ran around because we just thought we didn't want to be offensive and have the impression that our actor was running around slobbering all over the neck of another guy. Well, Willie got the bite on the wrist, and then we didn't let him bite anybody else, but if you may recall in the story, sheep were found dead and drained of blood every now and then, which is really kind of cheating. We said if we got the guy, well, we were going to have to use it. I'm really compressing this and making it funnier than it was, because you should have been in some of these meetings. Now, wait a minute, just a minute, they're very serious. We're talking about this. So we brought him in. Well, everybody loved Barnabas, and everybody decided, well, by the time Barnabas was over, he would bite anything that moved. The audience didn't care, and we loved it, and they loved it, and it was really a great sport. And it was actually, I think, I've done I started in television in 1950 and did live at the Armstrong Circle Theater for 8 years, and a whole raft of kinds of shows. This was unique. This was the best, most wonderful show I've ever done. I've liked all of them, but this gave me the biggest joy. I don't think there'll ever be another show like it. I do teach at NYU. I'm sort of cut back this year. I've only taught down there for 2 years. It isn't like I'm used to it. I'm a little nervous about it, as a matter of fact. Not that I don't feel I know my business. It's that I feel like I'm talking about a dead man every now and then, because to talk about television, which I was there in the beginning, I didn't know them when they made the tube, but in 1950 was really kind of the beginning of it. And I have a feeling when I'm standing there talking to the class and discussing it, that I'm reading my obituary. Not that I'm even talking about myself, but I'm talking about a period in which I played a big part in. It's not quite old enough to be history. Therefore, and a really good history of television has never been written, because so much of it was done on kinescope, as you see here, and was destroyed and lost and gone. So if you will find, and you see in evening television when they put, we're going to have a flashback on the history of television, you find you get I Love Lucy, and you get, but they're all film shows. They're all shows that came out of Hollywood, and at that time they started to do film because that's what they knew best, and we were still doing them live. So it's very hard to really do a representative. You can get a representative a programming view of what it's all about, because the kinescopes have been destroyed and they're gone. Anyway, to come back, I think it was really a marvelous show, and we did like it a whole lot, and we were very sorry to see it go. The question that's come up sometimes is, well, why didn't it continue? Well, it didn't continue because I don't think Dan Curtis wanted it to continue. I think he wanted to go to California, and as you probably follow his track record, you've seen he did Winds of War, and he's done a number of things for television. Some of them very, very good, and some of them big audience and okay. But here's the funny thing about this, and he really kind of backs away from Dark Shadows. It's like, I think it's the most original thing he's ever done. I think a lot of us will agree that worked on the show, that it was the most original, unique, and to sort of deny it, it's kind of dumb. But it went off, I think, because he wanted to go to California. The second thing is, the writers, and we kind of thought, maybe, what can Barnabas do? I mean, that he hasn't done already. It may have had its own demise built into it, because it was really a one-story show. You notice most soap operas are, let's say half-hour soap operas may have two major stories, and then one they call it on the back burner. So that as you phase out or complete one of your one or two show, whatever, this one slides in, and a new one then comes back on the back burner and is developed to be able to move it. This had one story, and it was about Barnabas Collins. So it was a little, no way could you compete with the character. See, we found ways to go into the past, we found a way we never went into the future. That we didn't want to do. But we found certain areas of it. We could bring in Quentin, but it always had to do with Barnabas, and they could be in conflict, but Barnabas remained the hub. Now, most shows, be they hour or half hour, you do have your central or your core characters, but they do not participate 100% in every story. Barnabas participated 100% in every story, and it was a big strain to try and develop new material for him all the time. We did figure out that maybe if we killed Dr. Hoffman off, she was the only one that knew. She looked back, I think she was the only one that knew Barnabas bit. If we knocked her off, we could maybe go back and recycle some of the stories. But then from the standpoint of the audience, it didn't seem plausible. It didn't seem that it would work. I think times change. As I said, I think it had its own built-in, and I think it was maybe the longest mini-series that was ever on the air. And maybe it died just in time. Maybe instead of trying to beat it to death, it died in pretty good shape. You know, meaning it was taken off, and so it was. We left them enjoying it rather than boring them away from the two. And that was kind of the resolution of the show. Let me see. Do you have any questions? I'm not going to go away, but I just maybe it's yes.
Yeah, you were talking about some of the very early episodes, black and whites.
Yeah.
As far back as I can remember, the show did open up with Lily opening up on this album.
Well, those are they showed. When they replayed them, that's where they picked the show up. When it first opened, we opened with a voiceover saying, "My name is Victoria Winters. I left New York City to accept employment in the town of Collinsport." And I just told them, we had shot footage before the show. We went up into near Newport again, because we tried to do most of our shooting up there easier and cheaper. We got it all in 2 weeks. We went down to the station and waited for the New York-Boston train to come whacking through. And setting their shivers from foot to foot. But we had one crack at it. If we missed the train, that was it. And then when the train went by, Victoria Winters scooted in around. We were on this side of the track, so that it looked like, then we could cut to a close-up of her, and you'd see the train could stop. We never saw the train stop. And then the train would go back, and then we were on the station, and this was her arriving in Collinsport. We did cheat enough that way. We shot that stuff on film and then rolled it in. There really wasn't wasn't videotaped to be moved around then. They were still shooting when we were on the air. They were still shooting. All the news was being done still. Nighttime news was being done on film. I was old. I mean, it's amazing in your lifetime how far electronically we've come. Yes. Yes, sir.
Next to Barnabas, who would you say is was the most popular character?
Who was?
Next to Barnabas, of course.
Well, I think Quentin got a lot of distance. I think some of them, of the running characters, you generally get rated by male. Victoria Winters got a lot of male. Hoffman got a lot of male. It was, Hoffman started out to be, what's your first name? Julia. It was Julia Hoffman. And one night, we were sitting at a bar, wetting our whistle, and this was the show was on, and Julius became Julia. Because Grayson was there, and it thought that would be a great idea. And it was a great idea. I mean, she could marvel with her. And so, I think she could play scenes with Barnabas that would have been a little dumb if a guy played with her. So it was really a very good story. But she gave it really credibility. But that's I think she was good. I really can't answer your question. I think once you got into the little stories, that there were a host of things. The little boy, David, got a lot of mail. But we went out to a little side thing with David. David's, I think David's father, when he was on, David was just about, well, he was about as big as you see him there, was put him down into here someplace. And David, I think his father had died, and he had a mother and two sisters. And he was a low man on the totem pole. So that David really found a home when he was cast in the show, and everybody loved him. He knew everybody's lines, he knew their blocking, he upset them a lot because he was smarter than they were. And then I say it, and you say it, shut up, kid. But he was so young, he had nothing to clutter his mind. He didn't think about girls, he didn't think about booze, he didn't think about anything. He just had to remember his lines. So he did, and he remembered them very well. But while we were shooting the original material up before we went on the air, David was going to come, and we were going to shoot some things with him in Newport and some other stuff at Essex. And so the morning we left New York, his mother brought David, and I thought, well, here we go. And I said, do you have your own car? I said to the mom. She said, no. We'll find another, we'll get it right. I said, oh, neat. The next thing I know, we're getting in the car, and there's David, but there's no mother. He said, my mother said that you could take care of me, and she left. So I had David, and I became the babysitter for little David. And he really was a funny kid. I had a son at the same time, same age as David. And when we were in Essex, for instance, there was the Griswold Inn there, which is really a very, very nice old inn with sea pictures and stuff, and the inn is upstairs, and we all stayed there. Well, David was always behind me. I'd take him, I'd put him to bed, give him magazines, and got a radio, and turn the radio and turn the light on, go downstairs. And the next thing somebody'd say, here's David, looking for me. See, he'd come over, he'd stand, he'd say, he's afraid of the dark, he doesn't want to go. So back up the stairs. So I did several jobs. Besides holding the hand of the company, I also became a surrogate father for little David for that trip. But we were a marvelous company that way. We really stuck together very well. We enjoyed each other, and many of us have continued. I've never worked on a show where the continuing relationship or the continuing friendship has been as it has been on this particular show. The directors, I worked with them subsequently many times. The designer, Cy Tomashoff, worked with many times. He came to do Ryan's Hope with me, and prior to that we worked together in Armstrong Circle Theater. Leila worked again with me on Ryan's Hope. Nancy went on, and we're still good friends, but she does not act anymore. But we still see all these people. Uncle Louis, Louis Edmonds, my my children, he became their Uncle Louie, because he's going to come Sunday, I'm told. And it was a very, very nice company. And I think it came through the picture. Beyond other things, you had a feeling they were nice people, and that generates an audience too. It's terribly important. Beyond just the cuckoo of the story, the idea that you are watching friendly, nice people, and you'd like to have dinner with them sometime. You wouldn't mind living next door. We did some. You may remember Sheriff Patterson. Sheriff Patterson. Well, he was rather short-lived, but he was the Collins, or he had to come up and investigate the dead sheep. So Sheriff Patterson would come through the door, and Sheriff Patterson is here, and everyone would, looking off in the other areas, and Sheriff Patterson's taking notes. Well, they got Sheriff Patterson. Somebody caught up with Sheriff Patterson, hurled him off the cliff, and one night out in my house, as a cliff nearby, we shot this body popping around in the water down below, and that was Sheriff Patterson. On his gravestone, with a straight face, and it never even occurred to me. Born so Sheriff Patterson. Well, isn't it that morning? I looked at the gravestone. His mother christened Sheriff. Nobody knew. We didn't pay any attention, so we moved right along with it until it was good. It was a little late to do anything about it. We had to plan it that day. I hadn't laughed so hard as last week. Any questions? Yes.
We absolutely adore the show. Is there any possibility you can resurrect it for?
Oh, I don't know, a lot of, there has been talk. They tried it. They tried it in New York, if any of you ever got, I think the PIX or somebody, this was quite a few years ago, they tried to, it had a very loyal but not large audience. And that sometimes is the way it is with very special things. They're special because they're appreciated and loved by a few. And that's what makes them special. So I don't think so. I don't know. I think to bring it back and try and do it again, I don't think we know how to do it again. I don't think there's a way to do it again. I think I've lost my touch in terms of being that kind of creative again. I have now become dependent on the electronic gimmicks. I think that one of our best writers are gone. You just do everything. It's like you can't go home again. Yes.
The public broadcasting system has been one that's picked up a lot of shows that also have loyal but limited audiences, like Monty Python and Prisoner. Has Dark Shadows ever availed itself to PBS?
I don't know. Curtis owns this. And what you do when you have any of these reruns is that whoever owns the show resigns it to a syndicator. They pay them a certain amount of money, and they then try and syndicate the show. So I have no idea. It's all done in California. See, we get at that time there wasn't a lot of residual in terms of reruns, and Curtis got something, but a lot of people, even the directors got the residual. A long time ago we did this. Started in '66. I guess not. I guess not. Also, we're not what you call a class act. I think they're crazy, but we give real class. Monty Python, it's okay to watch Monty Python, but this is no apology. I don't think the time is right. I think it's better we keep it special. Yeah. Yes, please.
I noticed that Art Wallace was credited with story creation and development.
Yeah.
How much contribution did that involve?
Well, in the beginning, it was, I believe the idea was Dan Curtis' idea. He was not a writer. Dan Curtis had made his reputation as a producer of a golf show on CBS. I mean, that's how we got in. We all had to start somewhere. I was an animal trainer. Actors and animals and things. So we got, what happened was that he got together with Art Wallace. Maybe their agents got them together, you see, because Art had to develop a long story project, or they wanted somebody with some experience, and Art had a lot of experience as a writer. So his contribution was big. But he and Dan presented the thing. Now, as also often happens in these things, that the honeymoon was over. Something happened, and I really don't know what. I never asked, but Dan and Art have kind of a falling out. I mean, I wouldn't put this in my Dark Shadow News if I were you, but I'm really kind of telling you how mechanics of television works sometimes, and then you'll say, well, why is his name still up there? He is still credited with having presented the characters and the direction that the show was going to go and that sort of thing, so he is still entitled to a credit. But after the first year, I believe, he resigned as a contributor to the show. But because he had been there in structuring the show, he was still, and rightly so, considered responsible for having developed the show with Dan Curtis. Does that answer your question?
Yes, well, I was wondering, Gordon Russell and
Well, then they came in, and well, there were several. Ron Spoke was also one of the writers. The one we saw here, Ron Spoke hadn't written. He was supposed to be here, but he's got. Sam Hall came in after Gordon Russell, and they wrote as a team. We would all meet every week. We would all meet Dan Curtis, the writers, 2 or 3 writers, and me. And we would then lay out what was to come several weeks from now, because you'd have to know the direction the show wanted to go, where you wanted to be at a certain time. There's certain times of the year that the television ratings, you are now going into television business, you are going to what are called the November sweeps, as some of you may know. That's why you'll see in the evening and even in the daytime soaps, all these big production numbers. I mean, some were in Barbados, some were in Mexico, some were in plane crashes. If anything, to get the audience, nighttime, they're springing their big stories. They're introducing Gina Lola Brigida, I think, on one of the series at night, to get audience. Because what the sweep does for the month of November, it sets the rate card. That is what the networks can charge for time. So that if you get a big audience on these shows, you charge a lot because it's cost per thousand of viewers. So that's what we go through sweeps. Answer your question. I seem to digress, speak off a little bit. But I think to give you a little bit of the biz, I don't want to take away from the fun of the Dark Shadows, but it might. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Have any of the pre-Barnabas kinescope tapes survived or whatever happened?
Yes, I think they're all. I think Dan Curtis has them all. It did very well in Spanish countries. It was redubbed into Spanish, and it was hysterically successful. I worked in Puerto Rico. I'm down there about either 1 or 2 weeks every month at a station called Telemundo. And they were just bought by Blair Broadcasting, which has a series of independent stations, and they do novelas. A novela is a soap opera. They do them a little differently. They do like 3 or 4 novellas a year, and they wrap up, each one is wrapped up as a separate story. That's because they can get an Argentine star that will come and stay for, say, 3 months, 4 months. They get a Mexican star, or one of theirs will go. In this way, nobody wants to come and commit themselves forever like they do in the soap operas here. So, at any rate, the acting style of the Cubans, you had to, I'm sorry, of the Puerto Ricans, and there were actually a lot of Cuban actors and Spanish actors in there too. But they're a lot more powerful. And it isn't good morning. They are Portuguese, you know, and it's a big thing. And so when they dub Dark Shadows, as Jonathan can tell you, it isn't just Barnabas. Barnabas! And it works great with this kind of a show. I did a show in Canada called Strange Paradise after... Yes. Well, you should have seen it in Spanish. If you didn't catch it in Spanish, I'm sorry, because you have no right to knock it. It was terrible in English. but it was wonderful in Spanish. Again, the Spanish language and their enthusiasm saved it someplace. I hope not. Anyway, that was a disaster, but it was upgraded a whole lot by using the Spanish thing. Way back in the front. Yes, sir. No, you with a black shirt and a beard.
I was wondering, what are actresses like Laura Parker and Sharon Smythe, who played Sarah Collins? Where are they now? What are they doing? How come we don't see them anymore?
I don't know where little Sharon Smythe is. She may have married a dentist and settled down in Brooklyn. I hope so. I think that, I know Laura Parker's in California, and she pops up on series every now and then. She's a day worker. I don't think she's I don't mean a day worker, but a contract player. She's not on the permanent cast of the series that I know. Most of them, I shouldn't say most of them, but a lot of them went to California. Some went into the theater, were picked up from the theater, and then went on out to California. Yes, sir.
Why did the actress who played Victoria Winter get special billing?
Her agent probably negotiated it. I mean, it's not, and I don't mean that to be a flip answer, but somehow it may have happened in the very early days when they thought she would play a bigger part. You see, once you give it to her, you can't take it away from her. She used to say, if you noticed from the top of "My name is Victoria Winters," and she did the voiceover. The union and her agent said if she says that and she's not on the show that day, she gets paid. See, but that represents a performance which represents a lot of money out of the budget. So finally, we would introduce anybody on the show that day that the camera wasn't going to fade up on. They would open the show with Colin Wood is in an awful condition. But I think that's probably why she got it, because she had planned originally she was to be the star of the show. She was a very appealing young lady. She married and divorced and has a little boy and was Klaus von Bülow's girlfriend. So she didn't exactly get out of show business. Yes. Oh, way back, yes. Gentlemen, yes.
How many episodes before Barnabas came into the picture?
I think about a year.
How many of those are still in existence?
I think they're all in existence.
I've read somewhere originally that when the show was originally aired, that the original episode, when the first week or so, that they didn't have those anymore.
Oh, they didn't? Oh.
Apparently, what I've read from the article is at the time they had lost those because no one really thought the show was going to do anything, and they just didn't save them. They take over them for something else.
Yeah, you could be right, because they never started. When they sell it from the introduction of the more bizarre story.
Is it possible they'll syndicate the earlier episodes?
I don't think so. I think because it didn't have the zap that this has. We had speaking of zap, that's what we used to, when we talked about it in Barnabas would fight, it was then he zaps from here, and then the zap was, but we had on the stairs, our dressing rooms were upstairs that went down into the studio, and there was a sign that says, "Don't forget your fangs." And it wasn't a joke. It was because on a couple of occasions, Barnabas got out and he carried them in his pocket. And when we'd be cutting away to the horrified look on the girl's face, he was slipping them in. And you could see him on the other camera. That day we stopped and went back and did it again. So the sign was up there, really not as nobody smiled. They went up there, oh, I should think so. They should have a sign up there in the first place. And one day put them in crooked and we're off camera. Crunch. One fang is hanging. It looked like Ollie, the Kukla flag. Yes, sir.
When Dr. Hoffman drew many tantrums on the set, were they meant to be funny or taken
I think she was playing it straight.
Can you tell us about Angelique's introduction to the show? Or any information?
Angelique loved Barnabas in another time, And Angelique was responsible. I really have forgotten. Maybe Barnabas remembers. You can ask him, Jonathan. I'm not sure. But at any rate, she fixed it so he wound up a vampire. She threw a curse on it. She was a woman with powers. And when he preferred Josette to her, she put the whammy on him. And he came north and joined the Collins family in that period, the 18th century. And the father stuck him in the box and chained him until Willie released him. Now that's really very loose, but Angelique was down there, and I don't remember where she came from, but she was...
Martin.
I mean Josette. I don't know, what am I saying?
Joseph personal maid, and they came Martin.
Right.
Her mother was a witch from Martinique.
Or a healer from
Angelique from Martinique. Yes?
When Angelique came to the show, what was the idea behind her? Because for me, she was a very appealing character.
She was to be a threat to Barnabas. You see, Barnabas had no threat. You see, there was nobody. Barnabas was, king of the Collinwood Hill there. Any guy that possessed his power. So she was a threat. You have to have conflict. Without her, and you can see where a whole opportunity would be missed. Also, yeah.
But at the end of the series, they fall in love. That's what happened.
Yeah.
But yet I read that he tells Julia that he loves her.
No.
That is a TV guy.
I really got a cop of plea. I honestly, I don't know.
I know,
That was Sam Hall's right.
Somebody will remember. I hate to disappoint you. God, I really don't. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was an article TV guide that tried to tie up the loose ends.
October of '71 by Sam Hall.
You know what it was? There was a terrible article. No. Okay, there was a terrible article written in TV Guide. A terrible article written in TV Guide called "Where Have All the Werewolves Gone?" It was some attempt on the part of some comedy writer to answer a letter
There was another
by
one
somebody who had asked what happened to all the characters in Dark Shadows. And he made fun of everybody. He said Carolyn went to Juilliard and David studied Riebeck and all kinds of garbage. It was absolutely terrible. The fans had an uproar. Fans went to an uproar. So I think it was Sam Paul wrote another article called
Whatever happened to Barnabas
here's what really would have happened to Barnabas and Company. And so he made up a plot. This is what we might have done had the show gone on, saying Barnabas fell in love with Julia.
Finally.
Well, that's it. I'm sorry, I didn't remember what happened. I guess nothing happened except 2 articles were written. Yes, sir.
Who got a job on the show?
Who what?
Did Grayson get Sam a job on the show, or did Sam get Grayson a job?
I think Sam was there first. Yeah, they're husband and wife. Yes.
A lot of the early episodes, even through the first 2 of Barnabas, there are often as few as 4 or 5 people to a show, which is unusually small. Is that because the other parts of the show are unusually expensive, the sets, the effects?
In the very early days, the very early Barnabas,
Yeah. Later they would have 6 or 7.
we didn't have a lot of story going. We tried the love story between between Joe and Maggie, and it didn't make it because they were really overpowered by. It only worked again in conjunction with Barnabas. I mean, they could love each other, and Joe could try and protect Maggie from Barnabas, but you had to have Barnabas. They couldn't just have their little love story going on over here. And I think it was kept small because you had one story. Yes, please. Yeah. Yes.
How soon
long did the fan mail start after Barnabas?
Oh, right away. Well, I mean, yeah, it took a little, it took a couple of weeks, but geez, the audience arrived. It started the build, as I say, with Josette and the interest and that story and the little girl that, and the wooden soldiers, and they were really rather touching and fun stories to do. And she had a little poem, and then there was a little girl that had died in this house, and there was the legend up there, and it was really sort of a fun kind of a thing. So Barnabas, that was a more delicate ghost story, a much softer children's ghost story. Barnabas, we had started to build an audience then, and then when Barnabas arrived, we had built a lot, and then his introduction, it went up appreciably. Yes.
You mentioned that bringing the show back as a soap opera is probably very poor at this point because of the various factors stated. What about the possibility of, if the interest increases, and apparently there is more interest than there was a few years ago, what about TV movies? How are the logistics in terms of that?
Well, I think, this is my opinion, I think they made 2 Dark Shadows pictures. Yeah, theatrical release. And I think they've been played on television. I got a feeling the time isn't right for, no, I don't think so. I think that they would back away. We're getting into the area of docudramas now. And Curtis directed it. Remember, there was a series about, not the occult, but about monsters with the reporter, Night Stalker. He directed that, and the one he directed, I thought was a very, very good one, about the vampire.
Laura Palmer was on it.
Yeah, he had, yes, and that was really a very good one. So that they do have a precedent for doing these things in the Night Stalker was their attempt at horror, but they ran out of monsters. You know, monsters are very tough to come up with. In terms of, every now and then, I mean, we got into I Ching, if you remember, and all that. It was really broken. It got boring every now and then. It took time, but you were compelled to do it, and you know, every night you didn't pray for the safety of your family. You prayed for a new idea to step up on the show, because I Ching wasn't it, but it had to be there. And it was a very difficult thing to keep that kind of thing, which is all part and parcel of Barnabas, but yes. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have 11 Newport. I was wondering if you could tell me where on Cliff Walk they did the opening scenes, because I've always tried to find it, and I've never been able to find that spot. Do you know, was it right in front of
where the house is?
No, I know where the house is. I'm trying to find the spot where the opening credits, where the rocks.
The ocean. It's not too far from the house. Yeah, it is not too far from the house, and if you go down to the path and you head south, it's along there somewhere.
That's a long strip, so I didn't
Now some of that, I'm not sure what shot you're using. We also found a piece of stock footage for the wave. But I thought you meant there was a section that did some crash, but the wave we got there, but the path we used and some of the rock stuff we shot along there for the story. The wave was that wiped the Dark Shadow. And the day we got, that's why I didn't say it. The day we got we had to come up for credits for a style of print. Yeah, everything you have to say, what? So I went to, on the Sunday Night Street in New York, there was a big bookshop just off Broadway, and I took a guy from the graphics, ABC Graphics, and we went up, and they had a wall of paperbacks, and we stood there and just looked at the print on the paperbacks. We had no idea what to call this stuff, and we came up with the Gothic D and the rest of the Roman stuff, but it was big creative thing by standing in front of a bunch of pocketbooks and being activated. Anybody else? Yes?
You mentioned that there were some outdoor segments in some of the shows. Even after the show went to color, they prepared a handful of episodes that appear to be nothing more than films made to tape, and they're black and white in that show went to color. Why was that done?
I think there were probably shots of the house.
I mean, the entire episode.
Yeah. Oh, Oh, I don't know.
I figured maybe the original syndication.
They may have blown the color somehow. They may have, in their transfers, they could have transferred it to black and white on stage. That was, see, color just came in when we started the show. We started uptown, or what we call uptown.
I'm very curious, when you went back into the past, you left everybody hanging in the present. Why did you do that for so long? I mean, we were watching the show and kept waiting for you to go back into the future, and these poor people were sitting around the table for
We didn't tell a very good story. We couldn't keep you worried about those people who had the soup halfway up there. We failed you. Well, we did it because we couldn't very well wrap it up. If someone had to go to sleep and activate you, or someone had to sit, or someone had to say, let's go into a trance, or the Ouija board is flipping around the table, something has to happen to move you.
The governess that came from the past to the present.
She died.
Did she die? She died.
Yeah, yes.
Did the ABC censors ever object to the show's content?
I think they were a little incredulous. I think they were too stunned to say. They never had anything to cope with. But they said, well, you know, we want this to be good taste. Oh. The bite on the wrist and we were killing animals. Yes, they did. As a matter of fact, they were a little, but it's like all things. The minute the show began to be popular, and they had and the sales were going up, and they were making a lot of money, suddenly it's all great. Yeah. We're doing so well, I think we got to watch it. Nobody's looking at it because Barnabas bit him on the neck, you know, and you got to watch that. So nobody can deny the buck. So that's why they look at it. They were a little anxious, but if you notice, once we got in it, it didn't make a hell of a lot of difference. For what they got on the air today, good grief. Yeah. Yes.
What was the difference in the pressure or regular stuff that you individually experienced?
Well, I think we laid ourselves on the line a lot more. Meaning that we had as you can see, well, of course, these were fluffs, but I think a lot of it had to do with the business. So you get so anxious to get your business right that you fluff your lines. You knew that in 1 second you had to pick up that dagger and not only stab yourself because it was a collapsible dagger, you had to press the button to collapse the piece. Otherwise, part of Barnabas will be played by. So I think that had a lot to do with, I think we worked harder. And I think we were more vetted, and God knows we didn't drink much coffee. And it was very little. And in those days, the soap was still more or less in the category of talking about. There were relationships and about people, but this was not a soap opera. This was a daytime something or other. And so we didn't get into that category, you see. So we had the supers, and we had the girls coming down, and we had Barnabas walking up to a mirror, and you don't see his picture. How do you do that? Wow, it wasn't easy. But we cut the heart out of it. We would put blue in the mirror, and then build an exact set that we had to be sure that the set was exactly in reverse. So that when you took the shot, a camera was overshooting this other set that was exactly like this, but in reverse. And all you could see Barnabas and the mirror, and what was beyond the mirror you could see around it, but really what you were seeing in the mirror was the other set. We got one crack at it, that was all. But there wasn't a lot of editing. So I think our pressures were different. But the rewards were greater. I mean, can you imagine making that work the first time? And I mean, it was really exciting. It was really, really, really fun. Yes?
How did you come to name the characters Barnabas, Josette, and Angelique?
I named Barnabas. At the time, Barnabas, At the time we were introducing Barnabas, Dan Curtis had to go to England for some reason. And you know, we weren't really sure about the vampire. We really weren't. I realized I didn't underline that kind of before. I mean, he could have passed off in 3 weeks. You know, he could have been let out of the box with a total failure, put him back in the box and forget it. So we just didn't know. So there wasn't a lot of attention being played to Barnabas. He got the same attention, a little more, because he was different. That you might give the introduction of a new character. And we did build it up, and my idea about pulling the thing and having it open, and about the lid coming up, and how to introduce it, and I mean, most of that I choreographed and in the design of the set and that sort of thing, because I had to see it to know we could build it, to know we could shoot it. That's what sometimes a good line producer can do. You become the coordinator or the producer. You've got all the elements. At any rate, Dan was away, and they were going to introduce this character. They'd written, but we hadn't had a name for him. So, I was raised in New York. I was raised in Jackson Heights, as a matter of fact. My mother still lives there. And in Flushing, there is an old Dutch burial ground in Flushing, Long Island. And on the grave, when it was Barnabas somebody or other, I thought, Jesus, there's a name for you. So we brought it, and everybody voted, and Barnabas got it. That's how we named it. We still didn't have an actor. And time is running out. And we have to paint a portrait. So among my many talents, I can sit still. So I got the costume, and we decided what the costume was going to be. Ramsey Mosteller was our costume designer. She's really wonderful. And we designed the idea of the ring. We've got to have the ring, and we get the wolf cape, and we got all that. Got the cape. We said his clothes. We didn't want him to be. If you notice, his clothes are part Edwardian, part something else. They seem to be, but we kind of created a period or a look for the vampire, rather than giving him a positive period. He wore a hat when he first came in. I don't think he ever wore the hat again. He looked like he was selling something. But we had the Inverness cape that came down and the no sleeves, and he looked dynamite. Still, we had no acting. So I sat there, my clothes came down, and we painted the pool. Meaning we had a marvelous scenic artist at ABC.
One more question. Someone wants to see you.
Oh.
Your special district.
Okay. Oh, Mom, I told you. We didn't have the actor, and we had really seen a lot of people. And we got a call from an agent. Now we got this empty canvas. I mean, empty. I got my medals, or it has its medals and its hair and its funny little things, its ring but no face. I done my bit, you know. So the agent called. He said, I got a guy that was in England doing Shakespeare. You ought to take a look at him. And here we go. We've got to take a look at him, because I think he had to work like in 3 days from that point. He came through the door, and I could have wept. He was marvelous. That was him. And he had, I don't know why, I'll tell you this anyway, but he had started to have some orthodont work done on his mouth. He got half of it done, and I love the way the other half looked. Leave it alone! I can't have a vampire on. So that had to stay the way. The artist got a hold of him, he stuck the face on, and we hung it on the wall, and that was the story of the portrait and the introduction of Barnabas and his name. And he's had it ever since. Okay.
Costello, it's my turn.
Okay.
we came over on the choo-choo tonight from New York, and we had a few minutes to sort of catch up after all these years. And it was great fun. And I wanted to be down here, but they put me up in my room. Kept me out of mischief for a while.
It's just been changing.
Yeah, they let me out of my chain, so here I am. I'm going to read the song to you.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.